What is going on? Hello again, football fans. Chris Dunn here, head coach of the Sacramento Miners. Back at it again on another episode of Miners Live every single Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Right here, you can catch the show live on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. If you are currently in the stream, be sure to hit that like button for me. We're up to 65 subscribers for those of you that have been tuning in and following the show throughout its infancy. You know that we started off with 0, obviously, just about a month and a half ago. Set a goal to get up to 50, hit the goal of 50. Now the stretch goal to get to 100. I am running a contest right now. Once we hit 100 subscribers on the YouTube channel, I will be giving away a t-shirt to one lucky fan, one lucky listener, subscriber. So be sure to support the show if you want to share that. Get your friends, family, other RFL fans, college series fans, esports fans, Madden fans, whoever they are. If you're a fan of the show, I would appreciate all the love and support. And always on Twitter at MinersRFL and on Instagram at MinersRFL. So the big news for tonight's show is that we are going to be giving you the first installment of the football Final Four, the College Series Final Four. The very first one will be unveiled tonight. I'm going to actually get into that in just a few moments because I want to get that out there for everyone. So we'll have some stuff to talk about because then later on in the show, I'm going to have a couple players actually on to discuss and go over the rankings. They'll be able to give their thoughts on where their team fell and just kind of go over some other things that have happened throughout the season so far. So really excited. I will have, if everything goes according to plan, I'm going to have a representative from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on the show later today. I will have a representative from the Alabama Crimson Tide, as well as the Michigan Wolverines joining the show today. So I will break down the top 10 rankings. This is my Campus Rewind top 10 power rankings, but it's really broken down into the Final Four, the first 2 teams out, and then the other 4 teams that are kind of just on the far outside looking in to this point. So some great stuff there. And then also later on in the show, I'll give you guys a flashback to the draft that just took place several months back and go over some prospects that fell a little bit. I had a chance to talk to some other coaches, some other GMs around the league, and sort of compiled my list, shared it with some notes that I got from some of the other GMs around the league to kind of give you this list of players that, for whatever reason, slid last year, this past draft. So maybe they were outstanding performers and they just, the draft just didn't fall the way that they wanted. And so we'll kind of go over that a little bit and the importance of that and what it means for you guys here as College Series 3 prospects. The biggest difference being that you guys are going to have 2 years in the league. So we'll get a little bit more opportunity to see you guys perform, see how well you guys perform over 2 seasons as opposed to just 1. You'll get a little bit more of a college track record, if you will. So that'll be interesting to kind of see how that goes. But before we get into any of that, before I get into last week's top 10 power rankings and then unveil the College Series Final Four presented by Campus Rewind, I wanted to take a quick moment just to give some early show shout outs to some of the guys in the room. I see we've got Coach Mitch. Nice to have you on the show. Good to have you again, buddy. We've got CP in the room, D'Lo. Who else we got? Strotter, 2 weeks in a row. I love it. Florida State boy. For those of you that don't know, I actually went up to Tallahassee this past weekend and went to the Florida State UMass game. It was an absolute drubbing. The final score was 59-3. Florida State beat UMass. It was kind of like what would have happened if Ohio State played against Arizona State. Right? I mean, that's kind of like what we'd be looking at if we saw a team like Ohio State or West Virginia play Auburn, Arizona State. Maybe not Auburn. Auburn showed some signs of life in the last couple of weeks, but certainly a team like Arizona State. Maybe a Wisconsin. Ohio State versus Wisconsin in the college series is probably the equivalent to what I saw in Tallahassee this past weekend when Florida State beat UMass 59-3. Lito Loso up in the room. Good to see you, buddy. We've got Leo Moon, my good buddy Anthony Fry. Do me a favor, drive safe, buddy. I don't want to read about you in the papers tomorrow. I need you in camp in a couple weeks. Okay, really excited about the upcoming season, so be safe. Rapid Fire Gaming, good to see you as always. So love the support. Thank you to each and every one of you who have been here for the long haul. Again, if you haven't had a chance, at Miners RFL on Twitter, at Miners RFL on Instagram, and please hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Yeah, Mitch, here you go. I appreciate that. So for those of you wondering why I went up to that game, I am originally from Massachusetts. I went to UMass. So I had some friends that came down for that game. And so we went up for the weekend and had a good time. Obviously it would have been better to see a little bit, I guess, better product on the field for UMass. It would have been nice to see a respectable game. For those of you that have a wagering interest, UMass was plus 35. I thought, what the heck? Let's take the 35 points. By halftime, I was like, no, it wasn't looking good. I think at the end of the third quarter, Florida State was already covering the spread at the end of the third quarter. So we left and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I've lost money. The team looks like garbage. Our pets' heads are falling off. Okay. It just was really a bad showing for the Minutemen up at UMass. But I don't want to waste any more of your time. We're already almost 10 minutes into the show, and I really want to get into these power rankings because I want to give you guys as much opportunity as possible to flip out. I want to give you as much opportunity as possible to tell me that I'm an idiot and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about and tell me that this is the dumbest, most idiotic, moronic list of top 10 teams and Final Four teams that you've ever seen in your entire life. I want you guys, right? Last week, I gave you about 5 minutes. It's not fair. I realized after the show that wasn't fair. You guys didn't get enough opportunity throughout the beginning, middle, and latter part of the show to rip me, tell me how dumb I am and how stupid half the things I said were. So now I feel like, okay, I'm going to give you more opportunity. I'm going to give you that because I know that's what you want. That's what you want. You want to just take everything that I say, blow it out of proportion, and then just go to town in the chat. So I am here for you. I'm here to give you what you want. So you're going to have all the time in the world once we go through these rankings. I am loving some of these comments. I'm not going to go through all of them. Of course, yeah, there's the UMass, UConn. We go through this every year. Yeah, there's a lot of bad teams in college. There are a lot of bad teams in college. And if you're a fan of one of those bad teams because you grew up in the area, because you went there, whatever the case might be, it can get embarrassing. They're called cupcakes for a reason. It's an automatic win. It's like I guess this time of year is perfect for it because it's Halloween, right? UMass playing Florida State is like candy. They're a patsy. They're a cupcake. It's like taking candy from a baby. So I guess it's fitting that this time of year we see some of these terribly scheduled games where you see teams like Alabama play Alabama A&M and they win by 50. And then you see Scott Van Pelt on Bad Beats a couple hours later complaining because they took the points at 59 and Alabama won by 60. Like these are the kind of things. That's the only thing you have to look forward to when you see a game like Alabama versus Alabama A&M is what's the point spread and is it going to be close? And is this at least going to give us something to talk about? And that's what Florida State UMass was. And unfortunately for me, I guess I shouldn't really say unfortunately for me. I grew up a bit of a Florida State fan because in New England, there isn't really college football. It doesn't matter. It's not like it is down here. For those of you that live in the South, and I know many of you do, especially a lot of you Florida guys, college football is God down here. You're in ACC territory, SEC territory, or in the state of Texas. If you're in ACC country, SEC country, or the state of Texas, college football is the biggest sport there is. Look, here in Tampa, I live in Tampa. The Buccaneers just won the Super Bowl. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won back-to-back Stanley Cups. The Tampa Bay Rays went to the World Series last year and won 100 games this past year. And you'd have a hard time convincing Florida State fans, Miami fans, Florida Gator fans that college football isn't bigger than all of those. The only thing that's bigger than them, I would say, is Tom Brady. If Tom Brady wasn't here, those college football teams would reign supreme, regardless of how bad they are. Florida State's not very good. Miami is not very good. Florida is the best team in the state of Florida right now, and they're, fourth best team in the SEC, right? But that's just how big college football is. It's huge in the South. It's not that big up north. And so for me, going to UMass, not really a big deal. They were Division II school at the time. So I just naturally gravitated towards schools that were nationally ranked, nationally televised, on TV all the time, had good exposure. And so for that, I just was drawn towards one of those teams. It was really Florida State. Look at the early 90s. We're talking Florida State. We're talking Notre Dame, Nebraska. Those were Michigan. Those are some of the big schools. And so that's how you wonder, like, how does a kid from Massachusetts become a Florida State fan? And you question people like me, like that. That's exactly how it is, because in New England, up north, college football doesn't matter. So you just gravitate towards some team that's on TV or some player that's on a team that you like. I happen to like Florida State as a kid. They were good. They were on TV a lot. They had a player by the name of Warwick Dunn, who I loved because my last name was Dunn. Stupid little things like that when you're a kid give you what you need to follow a certain team. And for me, that's what it was. All right, enough of the tangent, enough of the side story about me and why I went to Florida State versus UMass. Let's get right into it. So last week on the show, I gave you my top 10 power rankings. And so I'm going to recap those top 10 power rankings right now. And then we'll go into this week's Campus Rewind Final Four, the first two teams out, and then the other four teams that are still in the hunt. All right. So last week in at number 10 were the Michigan Wolverines. Okay. Now they didn't fare so well this past weekend as they fell to Notre Dame. Not going to get too much into the, each individual game, but if you had a chance to watch this game, it was a really exciting game. There were times where you thought maybe Michigan was going to come back and pull it out. Notre Dame held on for the victory. Last week, they were in at number 10. So in a few moments, you'll see where they are now. Perhaps they fell outside the top 10 with that loss. In at number 9, having not played last week, was Alabama. Number 8 was the Baylor Bears. Number 7 was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Again, I just mentioned that big win over Michigan. Number 6, and this is where there was a lot of controversy. This is where you guys had about 3 or 4 minutes to give me all the grief that you wanted. The Georgia Bulldogs came in at number 6. And at number 5, the North Carolina Tar Heels. Again, this was one that some people had some thoughts about. And at number 4, the West Virginia Mountaineers. Number 3, the Miami Hurricanes. Number 2 was the Ohio State Buckeyes. And once again, landing in the top spot, the undefeated USC Trojans. Now, some of the big talking points here, some of the areas that you guys struggled with or didn't agree with. Obviously, Georgia coming in at number 6 was a big one. A lot of you guys didn't like it. Okay, fine. This is fresh off of watching Georgia win games, but barely, right? Win games against teams that they should beat, but not win convincingly. Barely beating Auburn when, by all accounts, Auburn was the better team on the field that day. So when all is said and done, you guys can criticize and say what you want about these rankings on a week-to-week basis, but none of that matters because all of this is going to work itself out throughout the course of the season. Georgia fans, you might not like that I put you at number 6 in the power rankings last week, but throughout the course of the season, it will play itself out. If you continue to win games, even if you only win them by 1 or 2 points, which is exactly why I have you at number 6 right now to begin with, because you're barely getting by. Even if you continue to do that, it will work in your favor because at the end of the day, if you get to the end of the regular season and you only have 2 losses, you are almost guaranteed to make the conference championship game. And if you make the conference championship game with 2 or fewer losses, then you are certainly in a position to go to the Final Four with a win. So I don't want to hear all the complaints about this guy's a moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about. What do you mean Georgia's number 6 in the country? There are some teams that looked better in their games. Yeah, you want to say they didn't play the caliber of team? Fine. Okay, fine. But we expect more from Georgia, and we're not getting it. Yeah, they're winning, but they're not winning convincingly, and that's what we want to see. All right, so again, Michigan at 10, Bama at 9, Baylor at 8, Notre Dame at 7, Georgia at 6, North Carolina at 5, West Virginia was 4, Miami was 3, Ohio State was 2, and USC was number 1. That was last week's power rankings, okay? Now, I'm going to unveil for the first time all season the Campus Rewind Final Four, okay? And again, these are broken down by 4 teams that are in the hunt, 2 teams that are the first 2 teams out, and then the projected Final Four if it were to happen right now. If the Final Four were to take place right now, this is what you would see. This is the Campus Rewind Final Four. Again, things will work itself out. This is not league official. League official will be tomorrow night, and you can compare what I have here versus what becomes official tomorrow night. All of that's fine, and it makes for great debate. But right now, for my money, this list that I am giving you are the 4 teams that are in the hunt, first 2 teams out, and then the Final Four. So without any further ado, for the very first time all season, I bring you the 4 teams that are in the hunt if the college football playoff were to start right now. Those 4 teams, here we go. In at number 10, the Baylor Bears. 4-2 record. Baylor inside the top 10. They drop slightly from where they were last week. They were in at number 8. They dropped slightly. They got railroaded by West Virginia. Okay. I couldn't keep them. This was the only way that I could have kept Baylor in the top 10. And there was some internal debate about whether or not I was even going to put Baylor in the top 10. And there was 1 or 2 other teams that I thought about putting in that number 10 spot. But again, given what Baylor's been able to do throughout the course of the season, that week 1 loss is really tough because if not for that game, they may not have looked good. They may not have looked good, but it's hard to argue when their only loss up to this point was a blocked punt, which they had no business even attempting in the first place. right? So Baylor Bears in at number 10, the Oklahoma Sooners in at number 9. Now, this Oklahoma team is very hit or miss. We saw the first couple weeks of the season, they would fall into a deficit, build themselves out, maybe get a win, maybe not get a win. Then they would look like garbage. Then they would dominate again. So this Oklahoma team is very inconsistent. But when you look at some of the other teams, this is where you start to get separation. There's almost a dividing line between the top 10, maybe not the top 10, but probably a dividing line between where number 12 or 13 lie and actually having a chance to crack the top 10 versus all those other teams that are really just playing out the rest of the schedule. And some of those teams you look at, a Texas A&M or a Louisville, Tennessee, Clemson, that's another team that's very hit or miss. They can look great one week, terrible the next. LSU, these are all teams that you never know what you're getting. Those teams will be lucky if they ever get a chance to crack the top 10, and they certainly don't have any chance to make a run or even get to the Final Four at this point. So this is where we're starting to see the dividing line, and this Baylor Bears team, Oklahoma Sooners team, maybe one or two teams that aren't listed here are sort of where it ends. In at number 8, I've got the UNC Tar Heels. Now, this was a hard-fought game this past week. Actually, it was just last night between UNC and Miami. If you guys did not watch the UNC-Miami game, do yourself a favor and go back and watch that game immediately. It was a fantastic game. Once again, you thought that maybe the team that had the ball last, just like Miami and West Virginia, you thought that UNC having the ball last might win the game. It was a late interception thrown. I think Xavier Savage had a late pick that you thought was going to seal it for Miami. But then Darius Cager had a late pick for UNC that you thought was going to give Miles McCain a chance to drive down for the game-winning touchdown. And then, having not thrown an interception the entire game, Miles McCain, he threw the interception and then drives the team down the field, and then on the 1-yard line gets stuffed. I guess you could call it bad gameplay, bad game, mechanics, whatever. A little bit unfortunate that UNC doesn't get a chance to run that next play, but give it up to Robert Ivory with an absolute crucial stop on the 1-yard line, preventing UNC from getting in the end zone and forcing the clock to run out and thus giving Miami the win. So UNC comes in at number 8, Alabama in at number 7. Okay. Alabama hasn't really done anything to warrant being any higher than this. They've looked good. They've shown spurts of being a very solid team. I don't know if at any point they're going to get much higher than this. But Alabama right now, certainly in the mix. Again, these are the 4 teams that are in the hunt right now. So now let's go into the 2 teams that are the first 2 teams out. These 2 teams right here are right there. If the Final Four were to take place right now, I do not have these 2 teams in. They are barely outside. I will tell you, the difference between number 6 right here and number 2 is not that great. Okay? You can look at it on paper and say, oh my God, 6 versus 2. That's such a wide gap. That's such a large variance. It's not. These 2 teams, both of these 2 teams right here, number 6 and number 5, have a really good chance to get into that Final Four conversation. However, this is the initial Final Four rankings. So for right now, they are not in. Again, these 2 teams are the first 2 teams on the outside looking in, and they are the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, again, you've got about 30 minutes to roast because I know there's a lot of Georgia fans out there, and I know that they're not going to like this. They're not going to understand. They don't understand how they could not be in the Final Four as of right now. I'm telling you, it will play out the way that it needs to play out. And again, the disparity from 5 to 2 is so small. It is so small. And I'm not talking like one of you wins and the other one loses. Okay? The disparity is so small that I'm talking about if number 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2 all win over the next 2 weeks, but number 6 and number 5 win convincingly, and number 2 and number 4 barely escape, we could see some fluctuation. That's how close these are. I don't want to hear, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Georgia not being in the top 4 is stupid. I don't want to hear that because it's so close with these teams right now. And I know that if you're a Georgia fan, you might not like it. I know that you might be really mad. But I'm telling you, it's that close. And this all comes down to, look on the bright side, Georgia fans. Last week I had you at 6. You went up to 5. So next week, go out, win convincingly. Win convincingly. Don't escape against an inferior team. Win convincingly. We all know who you're playing next week. Maybe you're not going to win convincingly, but at that point, it doesn't matter because all you have to do is win that game. Georgia fans, you can complain all you want at being number 5 right now. All you have to do is win the game next week. That's it. Now, the Final Four, if it were to take place right now. Here we go. Let that sit. In at number 4, the West Virginia Mountaineers. Look, guys, this West Virginia team has 3 wins amongst teams that I have inside this top 10. And they are dominating in the majority of their contests. This West Virginia team is dominating on a weekly basis, with the exception of the Miami loss. This West Virginia team looks amazing. They also have the benefit of not having had their bye yet, so they have that extra win. So when you want to look back at Georgia, 6-1, versus West Virginia, 6-1, I'm going to tell you the difference is West Virginia is winning their games convincingly. West Virginia beat the doors off of Baylor. They knocked the socks off of all of the inferior teams that they've played on their schedule. Georgia's not doing that. That's the difference for me right there. West Virginia in at number 4. And if they started today, they would play USC as the number 1 seed. Number 2 seed, Miami Hurricanes. Number 3, Ohio State Buckeyes. At the end of the day, guys, it doesn't really matter who number 2 is versus number 3. They're going to play each other. And you're not playing on your home field, so it doesn't really matter. You want bragging rights to say that you were the number 2 team? Fine, but it doesn't really matter. This was difficult for me to decide between Miami and Ohio State. And I will be completely honest with you, up until about 45 minutes before the show went live, I had Ohio State at number 2. And I sat down, I looked at the schedule, I looked at my top 10 power rankings right here. And I said, you know what? This Miami team has 4 wins against teams that are inside this top 10. If you look at this top 10 list, that we just went over, Miami has beaten 4 of these teams. That is impressive. That is the reason why they jumped over Ohio State, because Ohio State doesn't have a single win against any of these teams in the top 10. And now I know Georgia fans are going to turn around and say, well, what do you mean then? How come Georgia didn't get in over Ohio State? And again, Ohio State got in over Georgia because Ohio State is beating the crap out of the teams that they play. And it's not even close. Ohio State and West Virginia are beating teams so convincingly that the only reason they're not higher on this list is because there's an undefeated team. Right? Like Miami gets the nod over Ohio State in at number 2 simply because they have beaten 4 teams that are inside this top 10. And that is your Campus Rewind Final Four, the very first installment of the Campus Rewind Final Four. And with all that being said, now I'm going to go out to the phones and I'm going to get some live reaction. This was just announced. You guys are all seeing this for the very first time. Again, I'll go back real briefly here. Back in through the top 10. So Baylor at 10, Oklahoma at 9, UNC at 8, Alabama at 7. Georgia and Notre Dame were the first 2 out. And then the final 4 as of right now, USC, Miami, Ohio State, West Virginia. We're going to go out to the phones right now and bring in Notre Dame defensive end Anaru Kala, who's going to join me right now to give his thoughts on these rankings as he just saw them himself for the very first time. Anaru Kala, how's it going, buddy?
I'm good. My mic working?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, good. I'll speak for Notre Dame first. Honestly, as someone who helped put together Discord, especially for our locker room, we definitely, even in our space, kind of agree with your take on us. We know, especially the beginning of the year and some of the harder games, we haven't performed as well as we should have, and that's just how college football works. It's not just about your win-loss record, but the quality of those wins and losses. So,
Right.
we get it. We just hope that we can finish out the season a lot stronger than we started it. And that's just kind of how we have this mindset. You just gotta look what's ahead. Can't focus on what you already messed up in the past or did well in the past. It's about the next game.
All right, so then let's do that. You want to talk about looking ahead? Let's go ahead and look ahead. We've got the schedule right here this week upcoming, right? This is the week for you guys. All of the games that you have played up to this point were to put you in a position to be exactly where you are. I mean, I don't think, at least for me, I don't think that you guys right now are anywhere that people didn't envision you being at this point. Maybe you're a little bit lower. Maybe preseason, some people thought that you would be a little bit higher in the rankings at this point, given all of the talent on the team. But again, none of that matters, because if you look at next week's game, you have the number 1 team in the country on the schedule. What are your thoughts about next week's matchup with USC?
Yeah, that's gonna be, man, that's our game right there. That's we hold our own future in our hands right now. And we got to make sure we capitalize on that. And we have to win this game. We don't want to be, you know, late in the season watching everyone else's game, hoping, oh, I hope they win and they win and they lose. We have the opportunity right now. We have destiny in our hands, and we have to win. That's going to start up front. With me, with Keno, with the guys in the interior, our defense has to step up. We've played good this year, but USC's different. And hopefully our offense kind of seems like at the beginning of the year, I don't know if it was just them not really playing together quite yet, getting used to the system, but Blade seems to have caught a hot streak and is executing on the plays much better than earlier on. And we're definitely going to need our offense to show out too.
Yeah, I think consistency on the offensive side of the ball is going to be key. I think you're right. I think you hit a good point there. I think Chet Blade has shown some ability to be one of the top quarterbacks in this college series, but then, the following quarter, like one quarter later or the next week, he struggles, and it's just not what you expected or not what you saw the game before. And so from a week to week basis, I guess to your point, it can be a little bit difficult to know what you're going to get on the defensive side of the ball. I think you guys are doing a great job. Let's go ahead and look at your schedule again for a minute here. You've got the big game this week against USC. Then you've got Baylor, who again is a tough team. Baylor inside this top 10 power rankings right now. So 2 critical contests for you guys before you get the bye. Then you've got Oregon, UNC, and Stanford. So if you look at the remaining 5 games on the schedule, 3 of those contests are against teams that are currently in this top 10. And one of them being against UNC. Let's look ahead several weeks, right? Let's get past Baylor. Let's get past the bye in Oregon. Let's talk about that UNC game, because let's assume that Miami stays where they are. That UNC game could very well determine which team faces Miami for the ACC championship game. So you could be looking at a situation where you beat UNC in week 12 and you then go to the ACC championship game to face Miami, who you lost to earlier this season. So what are your thoughts on that potential matchup, that rematch?
I hope that's not the potential rematch. I hope that's inevitable. Like I said, I want this to be a win out. That would be, honestly, I respect all our opponents in the ACC, so I'm not going to come out. I respect UNC too much to say, that's going to be a win. But, I hope we play well enough that it is a win. UNC is a very good team. Miami is a very good team. I know earlier on in the season, there was a lot of trash talk. Even some Notre Dame guys, I try to tell everyone, just settle down. Cream rises to the top, and you got to be careful, because if you talk smack early, especially in these good, down south ACC, SEC, you talk smack early and you don't back it up, it's bad. It can get pretty down bad in the general chat real quick, especially with Miami. They don't forget stuff.
No, certain teams just don't forget. They'll make hype videos. They will make memes. They will call you out. They'll make graphics. They'll reach out to me in DM and tell me all the reasons why your team's not that good and expect me to dissect it on next week's episode of Miners Live. I get it all. So I 100% agree with you. There's a certain level of trash talk that is acceptable. And then there's a certain level of trash talk that just takes it a little bit too far. And at that point, almost gets me into something I'm going to talk about later. And that's the draft for the RFL and what some of that can mean. But Anuru Kala, I appreciate all the time. Best of luck moving forward. Again, big game this weekend against USC. Be sure to check out RFL Live tomorrow night, as we will see when that game will be played, when that game will be aired. So be sure to check that out tomorrow night, 8:30 RFL Live. Thanks again for the time, and good luck against USC this weekend.
Yes, sir. Keep going strong with this pod, man. It's doing real well.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate the support. We'll talk soon, all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Take care. All right, so defensive end Anuru Kala of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Those are his thoughts about his team coming in at number 6. Again, one of the first 2 teams on the outs. Not in the Final Four as of right now, but just barely on the outside. One of the first 2 teams to get in if something were to happen inside the top 4. It doesn't even have to be a loss. We could see a scenario. We could envision a situation where one of these teams, maybe not USC, but one of these teams loses a game that they're not supposed to lose, or they play a team that they're supposed to win big and they barely get by a point or 2, and we can get some shakeup. Look, if Notre Dame goes out this weekend and beats USC, Notre Dame is going to be in one of these spots. I'm telling you that right now, and that's common sense. If Notre Dame beats USC, Notre Dame will be in one of these 4 spots next week when I unveil the second installment of these Final Four rankings. And depending on what that score looks like, and this is where it might not bode well for Miami and Ohio State and West Virginia, depending on what that score looks like, USC might still be there too. So again, there's a lot that's going to shake up this week. You've got Ohio State and Georgia. You've got USC and Notre Dame. If Notre Dame beats USC, I don't think USC, I don't know that I'm knocking USC outside the top 4 because they lost to number 6. I don't know that that's going to happen. So there's a real scenario where Miami moves up to number 1. Let's say Ohio State beats Georgia. Maybe Ohio State moves up to number 2. Ohio State might even jump into that number 1 spot if Notre Dame beats USC and Ohio State beats Georgia. Ohio State might jump into that number 1 spot. Miami stays at number 2. Notre Dame would move into likely that number 3 spot, maybe number 4. And then one of these, we could be looking at a team that's just on the outs, right? So there's a lot that can happen. This weekend is going to be intense. There are 2 absolute must-watch games this weekend. And I would envision that they're both going to be primetime 8 o'clock games. I would envision one of them is going to be Monday night at 8 o'clock or 8:30. And I wouldn't be surprised if the other one was this Thursday. I think there are 2 games on the schedule that are absolute must-watch games this week. And that's the Ohio State-Georgia game and the USC-Notre Dame game. And the greatest thing about them, they are non-conference. Non-conference games that mean this much at the midpoint of the college series. Huge games this week. All right, so I mentioned I'm going to have a couple guests throughout the show this week. I'm going to go back out to the phone lines, and we're going to go ahead and bring in Michigan quarterback Austin Briley, who is going to come on the show for the first time. Welcome to the show, Austin. Glad to have you on Miners Live. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. How about you?
Not too much. So you had a chance. The Final Four, the initial Final Four rankings are out. You saw last week I had you guys in at number 10 on the power rankings. Obviously a tough loss this past weekend to Notre Dame knocks you guys outside the top 10. I will tell you, you're not far outside the top 10. So what are your thoughts? I guess let's start. What are your thoughts on the top 10 rankings there and the Final Four as it was just unveiled?
So I think a lot of those teams, especially USC being the team that we obviously faced first to start their streak this season, that was definitely something I wasn't too surprised to see, as I think anybody else. As far as Ohio State and a couple of those ones, those are some games obviously that we're looking forward to. Very, very big coming up this season. I didn't really actually catch too much of the other ones aside from West Virginia, but I do think West Virginia is deservedly up there. And I actually found myself a lot today kind of questioning why Cardenas was the player of the week this week as opposed to Gotti last night. Just looking at overall the completions and all that he had, and then the incompletions in translation to the total yardage and the scores and all that. But I guess I don't really have too much to say about it. Our team has been very, very much a take it week by week basis, especially with the drastic focus that everyone likes to give my awareness and how we like to we like to be a little bit of a surprise every week. So I don't really have too much of an answer for that question, just because I haven't been able to really look at the rankings too much lately. I've been trying to battle COVID, so that's why my voice sounds a little bit raspy.
Oh, man. Well, get well, man. Best of luck.
Thank you. But as far as everything else goes, yeah, I think aside from Ohio State, I think all those teams that were up there are definitely probably going to stay up there, and I'm not too surprised by any one of those.
So let's talk about you. You mentioned something that you're right. A lot of people have opinions about, and a lot of people like to chime in and debate and criticize you for, and that is your awareness. What was your thought process when creating your player? Obviously, we know that this is an AI league. It is a simulation league where it's the computer versus the computer, and we are all at the mercy of the AI of the game. What was your thought process when you were creating your player in regards to not giving one of the 85 or 90 or 99 grades to your awareness attribute?
So, as far as a lot of the other really higher up coaches and stuff know in the RFL from my time actually coaching, this player was made very specifically based off of the path that I lived out through my high school career as a quarterback, and then what ultimately would have transpired into playing at Michigan before I had to get some knee surgeries done. And so, one of the biggest things that football kind of unveiled for me is I used to not be able to throw a ball at all. My
Really?
8th grade year, we had middle school football, and I was a 6'2" middle school lineman. I was the tallest person on my team, and I was just standing there, and I couldn't throw a ball, so I couldn't play quarterback. I couldn't catch the ball, so I couldn't play receiver. And so over that summer, I actually dealt with something pretty pivotal in my life, and then I came out of that. And one of my strengths that I told myself I was going to do is I was going to learn how to throw a football. And so my freshman year in high school, I had went to the football coach and I was like, I want to play quarterback. He's like, well, do you know how? And I was like, no, but I want to learn. And he's like, this is a pretty high up school just for you to want to learn. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was like, yep. And so the way my coach actually taught me how to play in high school was scramble or throw it to the open receiver. I was playing Madden to learn coverages. And so my on-field awareness as far as understanding what coverage was on the field and all that was slim to none. And so a lot of that was based on just the fact of making the biggest play that my eyes saw at the time, not really necessarily digging too deep, surgically into that. But I was always known for my accuracy in my arm. So what I ended up doing is I dug a little bit deeper into how those attributes were made up. And which is why you'll see my throwing power is 99. All my accuracies are 90, 95 or 90, one of the two. And then,
Right.
and so that all kind of played into that. And so it's more of a real
Yep. Did I lose you?
as a cool how it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I know there was a lot of talk preseason and even still throughout the season about how a quarterback can succeed. But look, I mean, you're putting up the numbers. You've got your team in a position to win week in and week out. You've had some close games that didn't go your way, and now you find yourself just outside the top 10 here in the power rankings. But you've got a player of the week already under your belt, which is something that not a lot of people can say. 27 of 36, 458 yards and 3 touchdowns earned you player of the week back in week 5. So the numbers are there, and regardless of what your awareness is, you're certainly putting your team in a position to win ball games. And at the end of the day, that's the name of the game, is win ball games. So let's take a quick peek at your upcoming schedule here. You mentioned Ohio State. Obviously, that's going to be a big one. That's the week 13 matchup. You guys are going to be at home against Ohio State. So maybe a little bit of an advantage because you're the home team, but let's also not look too far ahead because you guys have the bye week now. You've got Oklahoma State, which let's say is a win. You guys, I think, should be able to get by them. But I wouldn't look too far ahead to Ohio State because you've got Georgia in week 10. Forget Ohio State for a minute. What are your thoughts on Georgia?
So I think Georgia is going to be a very interesting game for not just us, but for them too. And I think that comes into the and I love AR. It's just their team seems to they seem to be too critical of themselves, if that makes any sense. If you go and you listen to how AR talks about his team, it's, well, if this was changed, we could be hitting 4 touchdowns. But the reason why AR is having to advocate for that for himself is because of whatever situation they got going on. That's not how it's unfolding. Their playbook is not allowing that. And so you see some of these teams that maybe Georgia shouldn't have beaten by a lot, and they're beating by a lot. And then you see some of these teams that Georgia should be beating by even more, and then it's a very close game. That South Carolina game was probably honestly a game that I would say, even if I was in his spot with the win still, was way too close for comfort. And so I think there's a lot of things that we capitalize on in certain game situations that maybe Georgia hasn't seen yet, but I think Georgia capitalizes in a lot of ways that we have not seen yet either. And so I think that'll be a very close game. It'll all depend on all 4 cylinders of our game: special teams, offense, defense, and the turnover battle, because as we've been seeing these last 2 weeks, unfortunately, JC's been having a little bit harder of a time. And if that rushing game isn't there and Georgia realizes real quick that we're going to be passing, then obviously that's going to create a much different outcome. And so I think that in particular is just going to be very much a situational game, not one that anybody could really predict too easily at the moment, because it'll be me versus AR and Johnson versus I forgot what their running back's name is.
Well, so I think what's really interesting is that you guys on the bye right now will be sitting back at home watching that Georgia-Ohio State game, knowing that you have to play both of those teams before the season ends. So I think that's something that I think will be interesting. And for you guys, obviously being able to sit back on the bye and just kind of watch and enjoy and not have to worry about your own game this weekend, just get to watch that game. That should be interesting. I think you'll be one of many, many people tuned into that game this week between Georgia and Ohio State. Austin, I appreciate the time. We'll get you out of here. We don't have a lot of time left. So and do me a favor, enjoy the bye week. I hope you get well soon. And we look forward to seeing you next week after the bye.
All righty.
Oklahoma State. We'll talk soon. All right. Thanks, Austin.
All right. See ya.
All right. Take care, man. Austin Briley, quarterback of the Michigan Wolverines. They did not land inside the top 10 on this week's power rankings. They were in at number 10 last week, outside the top 10 this week. Have a bye week. Maybe there's some fluctuation. Maybe they're able to get into the top 10 coming off of a bye. That remains to be seen what happens. There is a gigantic slate of games this weekend, and they will kick off on Thursday night. Again, don't forget, guys, RFL Live tomorrow night at 8:30. You'll get the official top 25 rankings, as well as the schedule for this upcoming week. Again, USC Notre Dame, Georgia Ohio State. Huge, huge games this week. So you're going to want to check those games out. Mark your calendar, set an alarm, set a reminder, whatever it is you have to do. You're going to want to be in front of your computer when those games go live. All right. Now we've only got about 10 minutes left in the show. One thing that I wanted to do was go over some players from last year's College Series class, because I think it's always good for the current College Series to look at their predecessors. It's always good for players that are currently playing in the College Series to look at what their RFL path could be, what their RFL path will be. I think a lot of you have an idea of what your RFL path should be and what you want it to be, but I don't think you always comprehend what it really looks like. And so I spoke to several GMs this past weekend, and I wanted to get together some players that dominated. I guess maybe I'm using the word dominated a little bit too loosely, but shined bright last season in the College Series, but when it came draft day, maybe the results, maybe what they expected wasn't quite there. Right. And so you look at some players, and I'm going to go over a list of players here that in one aspect or one element of their game, I feel were, I don't want to say overlooked on draft day, but I'll just say they slid a little bit in the draft. Now, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be drastic, but for whatever reason, these players are all players that I feel should have been selected higher than where they were. And I think that's important because you're going to notice a trend and a theme here with some of these players and some of the positions that they play when you look at yourself and your player and the current College Series 3 prospects. Okay, so I'm just going to, in no particular order, I got quarterback, last year quarterback out of Alabama, Jacob Mccall, right? You could make the argument that Jacob Mccall was one of the top 3 or 5 quarterbacks in the College Series. 29 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, 4,821 passing yards. He led the nation in passing yards last season. He was the 6th quarterback taken in the draft. Yes, the quarterback who led the league in passing was the 6th one taken. Okay, so I want you guys to think about that for a second, because I know a lot of you in the chat sit here and say, stats are what get you drafted. Stats are what get you drafted. Okay, Jacob Mccall led the nation in passing. He was the 6th quarterback taken. He was the 25th pick in the 2nd round. Okay, and now he's on a roster where he might be 3rd string. He might not even be the backup quarterback. Okay, another quarterback that put up great numbers. 33 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, 125.14 QBR. Led the nation in QBR. Led the nation in touchdown passes. Led the nation in fewest interceptions. He had the most touchdown passes in the league and the fewest interceptions amongst quarterbacks that qualified. And that is Owen Jack out of Oregon. Many of us felt he was the best quarterback in the league. Certainly top 3. Depending on what kind of quarterback you like and what kind of quarterback you're looking for, you may have thought Owen Jack was the 2nd best quarterback in the College Series. And who knows, maybe you thought he was the best. Maybe there are RFL GMs out there that for their scheme and for what they want out of the quarterback, they would have taken Owen Jack over Daryl Johnson. Maybe. I don't know. But Owen Jack was the 5th quarterback taken. He was the 21st pick in the 2nd round. These are 2 quarterbacks that were studs in the College Series last year. So for you guys that are at the quarterback position, that are looking at your numbers week in and week out, thinking, man, I got 3 touchdowns and 300 yards in 5 of our 6 games. Our team's only got 1 loss, and we lost to a team that's inside the top 5. Whatever the case might be. It's not always about that. There's several other factors. Discord activity, Discord inactivity, attitude, conversations, public perception, RFL front office perception, RFL general manager perception. These are all things that play into your draft stock. It's not just about leading the league in passing yards, leading the league in QBR. There's only one 1st-round pick that I have on this list that I think was a guy that slid. And I kind of throw him in there simply because I drafted him. and that's TJ Metcalf, because for my money, TJ Metcalf should not have been available for me at pick 14 overall. I took TJ Metcalf with the 14th overall pick in the first round. He had 12 sacks last year. That was second amongst defensive ends. And he had 14 tackle for loss from the defensive end position. That led all defensive ends last season in the college series. He was probably without argument the clear-cut number one defensive end in the draft. And so when you think of the defensive end position, you typically don't see the very first defensive end being selected at pick 14. Usually, the number one defensive end in the country is going somewhere in the top 5, certainly in the top 8 to 10. Okay. Is it a huge fall? No. Did I expect him to be there at 14? No, I did not. If you watch the draft, I wasn't the only one that was shocked that he slid. Several of the guys in the front office also shocked that he was there. Sort of a no-brainer pick for me when he was still there. But again, guy that slid. Great numbers in college, slid a little bit. Not a lot, still first-round pick, still fantastic. But some of these other guys, let's go to the running back position. So there's a couple names here at the running back position that I want to bring up, because running back is very interesting, because there's almost always a starting running back at every single school in the college series. We're almost guaranteed to have 25 plus user submitted running backs in the college series. Okay, so last year we've got Matthew Hallman had 1,344 yards on the ground, 8 total touchdowns. The 8 total touchdowns wasn't fantastic, but guys like Amir Williams and Cam Perkins sort of set the bar a little bit higher. And so they sort of raised the median a little bit, if you will. If not for the production from those two guys, a guy like Matt Hallman's season last year was fantastic. His 8 touchdowns were still top 10. He was still top 10 in the college series in touchdowns, and he had over 1,300 rushing yards. He was selected in the 4th round, guys. He was a 4th round pick. He went 25th overall, 25th in the 4th round. So all of you running backs out there wondering what the RFL might look like for you, I hope you're okay and prepared to be a 4th round pick, because Matthew Hallman was RB10 in the draft. Let me say that one more time. He was the 10th running back taken in the draft, and it was in the 4th round and the end of the 4th round, pick number 25. So for those of you that are looking at this college series and see 17, 18, 19, 20 running backs, wondering where you fit in amongst those other running backs, Matthew Hallman, RB10 this past season. Karim Belrich is another one. He was 3rd in the country in yards per carry, 5.13 yards per carry. There's only 2 running backs in the college series who averaged more yards per carry than Karim Belrich last year. Guess who they were? Yeah, Amir Williams and Cam Perkins. The only 2 running backs to average more yards per carry. You know where he went? The 7th round. He was the first pick in the 7th round. What are we talking about here? We're talking about really good players putting up really good numbers and getting overlooked and just free falling down draft boards, free falling in the draft. Okay. It's not just about your numbers. Here we go. Great. This is exactly what I think every College Series 3 prospect should take away from this segment. is what Amari Harris Jr. says right here. I just stay humble, stay active. Quite honestly, you could simplify that to 4 words. Stay humble, stay active. That's it. If I could leave every college series prospect with one simple mantra, that would be it. So thank you, Amari Harris. Stay humble, stay active. It's your activity that's going to get you noticed. It's your activity that's going to get you to rise up draft boards. However, it's also your activity that's going to get you to fall on draft boards. There's still another 1.5 years of activity for scouts and general managers and coaches and coordinators to look at and evaluate before anyone has to make a decision on where these prospects go, on where any of you guys get selected. Now, the good thing is you get an extra year, but the bad thing is you get an extra year. If you start acting a fool and you start acting stupid, you know what? You know what happens when you start acting a fool and you start acting stupid? I will tell you what happens. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. You guys have the ability to be first-round picks. Some of you. But you also have the ability to be first-round talents that get selected in the 4th round if you don't stay humble and stay active. And the sad thing is the stay humble part is very difficult for a lot of the very active people. But for those of you that don't stay active, you're not getting this message anyway. You're not watching Miners Live. You're not watching RFL Live. You're not paying attention to any of this. And that's unfortunate because for all you know, your player is going out there week in and week out and dominating, but he's going to end up getting selected in the 4th round of the draft because he notices that there's no activity. You're not involved. You're not engaged. You don't react. You don't interact. Good or bad. Right? A couple other names on here. One more before we get out of here because we got to get going. A couple here. Javon Cruz, 5th round pick, defensive end. 13.5 sacks. 13.5 sacks last year in the college series. Number 1 defensive end in terms of sacks. The only player who had more sacks than Javon Cruz was Jermaine Taylor. And Jermaine Taylor went 2nd overall. Let's say that again. Jermaine Taylor was the only player in the college series that had more sacks than Javon Cruz. Jermaine Taylor went 2nd overall. Javon Cruz went 1st in the 5th round. He literally went in the 5th round. And Trey Simeon's strong safety out of UCLA. Listen to this stat line. 115 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, one forced fumble, and 2 fumble recovered. He was the 23rd pick in the 2nd round, a late 2nd round pick. By all accounts, all of these players should have been drafted higher, but they weren't. They weren't. Whether it's activity, inactivity, attitude, whatever it might be. They could have gone higher, but they didn't. I will leave you guys with that. Again, appreciate all of you for tuning in, checking out the show tonight. Real quick, we'll go back one last time for those of you that have caught the show at the tail end. Earlier on in the show, I unveiled the Campus Rewind Final Four rankings for the very first time this season, starting with the first 4 teams in the hunt. Those 4 teams: Baylor Bears, Oklahoma Sooners, UNC Tar Heels, Alabama Crimson Tide. Then the first 2 teams on the outside looking in: the Georgia Bulldogs at number 5 and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish at number 6. And then the Final Four as of right now, as we head into week 8, the final 4 would be USC, Miami, Ohio State, and West Virginia. USC, Miami, Ohio State, West Virginia. Again, guys, a lot of this is going to play out this upcoming week. Big games between USC and Notre Dame. Big game between Ohio State and Georgia. So as always, appreciate the time, appreciate the support. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Sacramento Miners on YouTube, Chris Dunn on YouTube, at Miners RFL on Twitter, at Miners RFL on Instagram. Any questions for me, comments, concerns, things that you would like to see addressed on the show for next week, you can hit me up on Discord. Send me a DM on Discord. Let me know what's on your mind. Let me know what you want to talk about. If you want to come on the show, let me know. I can schedule a time. If you're not available during the live broadcast between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time on a Tuesday, let me know. If you want to come on the show, we can schedule something. I can set up some time to do a pre-record. My door is open for you guys. If you want to come on the show, love to have you on the show. Until next time, guys, again, at Miners RFL on Twitter, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram, and then Sacramento Miners, Chris Dunn on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. Get those notifications so you never miss another episode of Miners Live. Until next week, this has been your host, Chris Dunn, head coach of the Sacramento Miners, for another episode of Miners Live. Take care, everybody. We will see you next week.